Whatever your dreams, HCC can make them reality. College classes, extra training, a new career. Be whatever you want to be. From HCC, you can go anywhere. HCC. Smart decision.
Let's talk Texans. Do they have any needs?
Do they? What type of question is that? When you ask if they have any needs, I have to give you three of them. Defense, defense, and defense. This is one draft. I don't think it will happen, but I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be upset if they drafted all defensive players. Before you even get to the draft, one thing I do like, they brought in Wade Phillips and Coach Joseph. I think Coach Joseph coming in from San Francisco, he's a new defensive back coach, might be the biggest acquisition on this team. And I know that's a bold statement, but when you look at the personnel, Kareem Jackson, Jason Allen, Glover Quinn, McCain, those guys aren't as bad as they appeared to be last year. And with a new coach that has NFL experience, who's old enough to demand respect, but yet young enough to relate to these players, I really think he's going to have a huge impact on the defensive backfield this year, and you're going to see a great improvement because of Coach Joseph.
Since the season ended and I was covering the playoffs and the NFL, prepared for the draft, and I've talked to a lot of people, they tell me Texans had one of the worst coach secondaries they'd ever seen. And that's one reason they fired David Gibbs. Frank Bush, the coordinator, had to pay for it with his job as well. Of course, Gary Kubiak's ultimately responsible because he hired Frank Bush. And Wade's a very confident guy, and Wade always says something, and you played 12 years. Why do more coaches not say this? Wade says when you're drafting or free agent or whatever, you find what the guy does well, try to maximize it, and what he doesn't do well, you try to minimize it. That sounds so simple, but they said last year the Texans put those DBs in situations that they couldn't handle, which maximized their weaknesses. Why is that such a hard thing?
It's not that it's hard. They overthink. And I love what you quoted Wade Phillips is saying. In football, it can get complex when you look at the plays, you look at the playbooks, but it's still catching, tackling, running, and throwing the ball. It's still very simple, and don't overcomplicate it. And just as you said, when you look at a player like Mario Williams, I think his best asset is his pass rushing, is his speed rush. So you put him on the edge and you let him speed rush, and you don't overcomplicate, and that goes for the linebackers and for the DB. So hopefully Wade Phillips will stick to what he told you and keep it simple when it needs to be simple and just maximize everybody's strengths. And when they're in a situation where certain players' strengths don't fit those needs, you take them out and put another person in, and that's what's called a role player and role situation. So I really think the addition of Wade Phillips is going to have a huge impact. The one thing that scares me, and I know we'll get to it later in the show, is the fact that they're changing from a 4-3 to a 3-4 system, and with this supposed lockout, they're not going to have time to gel and really learn an entirely new system. It's hard enough to learn terminology of a new coach within the same system, but when you're talking about changing an entire system, even though it's the hybrid version of the 3-4, it still takes a lot of learning, and it's the one time that I actually agree in OTAs and mini camps where you need those one-on-one sessions with your coach.
I know you didn't have this at Rice, but they're going to have to use the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, when they come out, because that's going to be so important. But who are some of the players? Now, we're going to give our picks at the end of the show about who we think the Texans are going to take. But right now, who are some of the defensive guys that you think are candidates for them to take with 11th pick, assuming they stay there?
Well, you always have to go with a pass rusher, and we don't want to get too deep into it just yet. There's some names that we're going to throw out there. Robert Quinn. I'm not set thinking that he's going to be there for sure. You know, a lot of teams
not
like
with a brain tumor.
You talk about the brain tumor. You know, he had brain surgery. That's something
when he was in high school.
That's very scary to know that he missed an entire season dealing with an agent. So either he may drop past 11, but with his upside, 6'4", 265, 4'6", 40, you know, some GM might just grab him before he gets to number 11. So when you talk position, I think the number one need is a pass rusher when you're moving from a 4-3 to a 3-4. And not only that, not just because of the system change, you have to look at what's going on with the linebackers. This time last year, I thought the linebacker probably was the strongest unit on the team. Now it's the unit with the most question marks. Your fearless leader, D'Amico Ryans, is coming off a horrific injury, so he has something to prove. Connor Barron, the last image I have of him is his bones sticking out of his ankle. So he has something to prove. Then Brian Cushing is going to his third position in 3 years when you think about it. He was playing outside linebacker in the 4-3 when he was drafted. They moved him inside. That didn't work. Now he's going to be inside in a 3-4. So he's learning 3 positions in 3 years. So he has something to prove to see that he can adapt to that new system. So I think the biggest question mark isn't the defensive backs, it's the linebacker position.
The guy they really need, Texas A&M. A&M's Von Miller, the outside linebacker, but they're not going to get him because he's going to end up being like the second pick or third pick. But let me ask you this. If Gary Kubiak's job is on the line, we all know that. They're not going to go 6 years without making the playoffs or at least having a winning record. What is too much to offer to trade up with a second pick? Would you give up a 1 this year, a 2 this year, and a 1 next year?
I wouldn't give up any picks this year. I believe the NFL draft is a gamble, and you find so much value in the second, third, fourth round. So I would not give up any picks. What I would do to try to move up is give up players. The package that I put together when I was in my office pretending to be Rick Smith, the GM, I put together a package of Steve Slayton, who I think other teams feel is going to be productive still, Amobi Okoye, who for whatever reason Wade Phillips never mentions when he talks about the future, and the number 11 pick. So if you package a deal with Amobi, Steve Slayton, the number 11 pick, I think you can move up in the draft and nab the guy you want. I don't know if that'll get you all the way up to number 2.
Well, you tell me a GM dumb enough to make that deal. Here's Steve Slayton, hadn't run in 3 years. Amobi, now, some people call Amobi Okoye a bust, but to me, a bust is Vernon Golston from the Jets. Amobi started 4 years. He plays the run well. He's been a bust as a pass rusher, but he's a 4-3 tackle. I think that's why we don't hear more about him.